What if Jesus never went to the cross? A calm walk through an alternate history. Picture a quiet evening in Jerusalem, around 30 AD. A man named Jesus of Nazareth has been arrested. The crowd is restless. Pilate is washing his hands like he just touched something he regrets. But in this story, he doesn't go to the cross. Maybe he slips away into the crowd. Maybe his followers hide him in the hills of Galilee, and he lives out a long, quiet life as a respected teacher. The kind of guy villagers point to and say, "Oh yeah, he gives great advice, but have you tried his carpentry? Mixed reviews." Tonight we're going to follow that thread, gently, like pulling on a loose sweater string and watching how much of the sweater comes with it. We'll walk through how the world might have unfolded, and at the end, we'll come back to that original night and ask a simple question. Why did this moment end up being the hinge the entire next 2,000 years swung on? Get comfortable. This is a long, slow walk. In our actual history, the resurrection is the engine. It's the thing that took a small group of grieving followers and turned them, within decades, into a movement that would eventually reach every continent on Earth. Without it, most historians agree Jesus likely becomes one of many respected Jewish teachers of his era, and there were quite a few. First-century Judea was basically a crowded stage of preachers, healers, and would-be messiahs, most of whom history has completely forgotten. John the Baptist, Theudas, Judas of Galilee. Names that, unless you're a seminary student or really enjoy trivia nights, you've probably never heard. His teachings, love your neighbor, the meek inheriting the earth, turning the other cheek, were beautiful, and arguably the most influential ethical framework in human history. But on their own, even beautiful ideas tend to fade with their teacher unless something extraordinary keeps the story alive. Without the empty tomb, this becomes a wonderful, quietly influential, regional Jewish reform movement, possibly absorbed back into mainstream Judaism within a generation or two. No Paul, no blueprint, no greatest hits album. A huge chunk of the New Testament wasn't written by Jesus. It was written by a man who never met him during his lifetime, Paul of Tarsus, formerly a guy who was very enthusiastically against this whole movement. Paul's transformation, according to the story, was triggered by an encounter with the resurrected Jesus on the road to Damascus. Remove the resurrection, and there's no dramatic plot twist. Paul just stays a tent maker with strong opinions. Without Paul's letters and missionary journeys, Antioch, Corinth, Ephesus, Rome, there's no blueprint for taking this message beyond Judaism's borders. No translation of the message into the language and philosophy of the wider Greco-Roman world. The movement, if it survives at all, likely stays culturally and geographically Jewish. Rome without the church. Fast forward to the early 300s. In our timeline, Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity, and the empire's entire trajectory shifts. When Western Rome eventually collapses in the 400s, the church is one of the only institutions left standing. Monasteries preserve literacy, bishops become local authorities, Latin survives. Without a Christianity for Rome to adopt, a few things become more likely. Rome may continue with its traditional pantheon longer, or lean further into an already popular Eastern import. The cult of Mithras was huge among Roman soldiers, basically the ancient equivalent of a wildly popular gym bro religion. Lots of bulls, lots of secret handshakes. And without church institutions filling the power vacuum after Rome's fall, the Dark Ages might genuinely be darker and longer. A lot of the administrative continuity, charity networks, and literacy preservation that helped medieval Europe eventually claw its way back ran straight through monasteries and dioceses. Islam, historically, didn't emerge in a vacuum. It emerged in a region shaped heavily by both Judaism and Christianity. The Quran actually references Jesus, called Isa, more times than it references Muhammad, affirms his virgin birth, and honors him as a major prophet. Most interpretations within Islam even hold that Jesus wasn't crucified at all, but was raised to heaven before it happened. So, in a world where there's no Christian community in the region for Muhammad's teachings to engage with, what does 7th century Arabia look like religiously? Honestly, it's hard to say with any confidence. Maybe Islam still emerges in some form, but with a very different relationship to the people of the book. Maybe the entire religious map of the Middle East, and everything downstream of it, from the spread of Islam into Spain, to the Crusades, to the Ottoman Empire, looks unrecognizable. More wars or fewer? Let's tackle the big one. A lot of history's bloodiest chapters used Christian identity as a banner. The Crusades, the 30 Years' War, which killed an estimated 8 million people across Central Europe, centuries of Catholic-Protestant conflict. Remove Christianity as a major civilizational force, and those specific wars don't happen. But, and historians are quick to point this out, humans don't need religion to go to war. We fought plenty before any major world religion existed, and officially atheist 20th century states managed to rack up staggering body counts all on their own. Religion has often been less the cause of conflict, and more the language used to justify conflicts that were really about land, power, and old grudges. So the honest answer, the specific wars change a lot, but the underlying human tendency toward conflict doesn't disappear. It just finds a different flag to march under. Possibly tribal and ethnic identity becomes the dominant fault line again, the way it largely was before these large universalizing religions came along. There's also a less obvious point. Christianity also produced some of history's strongest anti-war and charitable institutions. Monasteries, hospitals, just war theory that actually tried to limit warfare's brutality. Remove those stabilizing forces, and some historians argue medieval Europe could have been more chaotic, not less. What would the world look like today? Okay, let's actually try to picture it. Close your eyes. No Notre Dame, no St. Peter's Basilica, no Sistine Chapel ceiling with God and Adam dramatically not quite touching fingers. Skylines across Europe look fundamentally different. Instead of cathedral spires dominating every town square, picture city centers built around something else entirely. Maybe grand temple complexes to a half-dozen different regional gods. Maybe sprawling philosophical academies in the Greco-Roman tradition, the way Athens once looked. Walk through a modern Western city in this world, and the calendar itself is different. No Sunday as a day of rest baked into the week. No Christmas, no Easter, no BC AD as the default way humanity marks time. Major holidays might instead trace back to old harvest festivals, Roman state celebrations, or whatever regional faiths filled the gap, meaning your December might just be a regular, depressing month with no twinkly lights. Truly a tragedy. Hospitals, believe it or not, have a complicated history here. Many of the earliest hospitals in Europe were founded by religious orders as acts of charity. Without that specific charitable tradition, organized large-scale medical care for the poor might have developed slower, or emerged from a completely different cultural motivation. Civic pride, perhaps, the way Roman bathhouses were a public good. Universities, Oxford, Paris, Bologna, were founded as church institutions. Picture instead a world where higher learning stays the property of wealthy elites for far longer, without that strange medieval accident where monks, of all people, ended up safeguarding and spreading literacy to the masses. And socially? A huge amount of what Western culture considers default, concepts like universal human dignity, forgiveness as a virtue rather than weakness, and caring for strangers, orphans, and the sick as a moral duty. These ideas existed elsewhere, but Christianity planted them deeply into Western law, charity, and conscience. Inventions, delays, and surprise speed-ups. Here's a fun one. What gets delayed, and what might actually happen faster? Delayed. The printing press's most famous early project was the Gutenberg Bible. Without that enormous built-in audience for religious texts, adoption across Europe may have been slower. University-based scientific inquiry could also be delayed by centuries without the monastery-to-university pipeline. Possibly faster. Without centuries of theological debate consuming Europe's brightest minds, and occasional conflicts between religious authorities and scientific ideas, some argue science could advance faster in certain periods. Also, without a unifying Christian identity giving medieval Europe a shared sense of us, European powers might either fragment into smaller, more constantly warring states, or, alternatively, unify faster under a different shared identity, perhaps a revived Roman imperial idea, accelerating large-scale engineering and infrastructure the way Rome itself once did. It's genuinely a coin flip which way history tips on several of these, which is exactly why this is fun to think about, and exactly why historians who study counterfactuals tend to throw their hands up after about 3 steps. The branches multiply fast. So here we are, a world without the Crusades or the Reformation Wars, but also without cathedrals, without the university system as we know it, without hospitals as a charitable Christian invention, without Christmas lights, without the very framework of human dignity that much of modern human rights law is built on. From a purely historical, not theological, standpoint, here's what's worth sitting with. The crucifixion wasn't just an event in early Christianity. It was the load-bearing wall of the entire structure. Without it, there's no resurrection. And the resurrection is what early Christians themselves pointed to as the reason their movement didn't fade away like every other failed messianic movement of that era did. Without a risen Jesus, there's no Damascus Road moment for Paul. Without Paul, no theology that could travel beyond Judaism's borders into the wider world. Without that spread, no institutional church to anchor European identity, preserve knowledge through Rome's collapse, found the first universities, or shape the world that Islam would later emerge alongside. Pull that one thread, and the tapestry doesn't lose a thread. It unravels into something unrecognizable. And here's the part that's genuinely worth sitting with, whatever your beliefs. For Christians, this isn't just an interesting historical accident. It's the point. The cross isn't a tragic detour that Christianity had to awkwardly build a religion around afterward. It's presented, from the very beginning, as the plan all along. The moment where, as the story goes, love was proven not by avoiding suffering, but by walking straight into it for the sake of others. Whether you read that as history, theology, or both, it's hard to deny that idea alone has shaped how billions of people have thought about sacrifice, forgiveness, and what it means to love someone for 2,000 years running. Maybe that's worth a quiet thought tonight, not as homework, just as something to turn over slowly, the way you'd turn over a smooth stone in your pocket. Of course, all of this is speculation. The fun kind. The kind meant for a quiet evening, not a debate. History doesn't move on rails, and 1,000 small variables could send any of these threads somewhere none of us would guess. But it's a good reminder of just how much of the world around us, its art, its calendars, its hospitals, its idea of what we owe to strangers, traces back to a handful of pivotal moments. And this one, on a quiet hill outside Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, might be the biggest of them all. Thanks for spending this time with me tonight. If you enjoyed wandering through this what if, let me know what other turning points you'd like to explore next. Sleep well.